Greetings, brethren, sisters. Hail Eris, hail the light. We meet upon the level of equality, act by the plumb of uprightness, and part upon the square of virtues. Once again, don't we? Very much so. Today is the 8th lecture of the 8-lecture series on Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness. I'm a 5th degree Episcopos in the Polytheo Meta-Animistic of Eris Esoteric, which is the highest degree in the POEE. I'm a manager of the New Discordian Society, and I'm a Grand Master as well in the Discordian Illuminati. The idea comes to mind to just explode sort of all over the House of Eris in celebration and in enjoyment because of how much of a pleasure it has been for me to bring to the House of Eris members Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness. I am absolutely excited about this one as I was the first one. Because all along the way, each circuit has been explained in terms of relevancy or relativity to Discordians, so we are found exploring the 8 circuits of consciousness, right, for the purpose of embracing and harnessing and forging relations through Discordianism. Right? The 8th circuit of consciousness is the psychoatomic circuit. The psychoatomic circuit allows access to the intergalactic consciousness that predates life in the universe and lets humans operate outside of space, time, and the constraints of relativity. Right? The 4th dimension is going to call for a little bit, because it's time in physics. And the 3rd dimensional space, well, it's 3-dimensional. It's totally whole, right? With the psychological exception, if you will, to the volume of it, the mathematical space, that is the 4th dimension, which is time. Otherwise, they're constraints of reality, sure. It lets humans operate outside of space-time as well as outside of the constraints of reality. So it's called the psychoatomic circuit, where we get outside of space-time, outside of the 4th dimension, and the constraints of reality. How is this? Well, it's a conscious thing, if you ask me. It's mind-wrecking. Frankly, it's exhausting. Physiologically, it is exhausting. We deplete energy the more we use our mind or our body, right? Because, well, they're associated together, and it is inappropriate to separate the two. So the body is doing one thing with the brain, of course, and the mind is also doing one thing, but it is, as it does its thing, modifying what its results are or what its its final findings, if you are. And that is to make sure that it's also working in association with the physical body. So we don't go into things that are harmful just because we perceive them. We deem them safe. Sometimes we perceive things and we deem that things unsafe, right? So constraints of reality is about thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, which is necessary to a degree in the fourth dimension when we are inside of a three-dimensional space. It can be exhausting when we are talking or approaching it with the sort of Sufism, right? It's associated with ketamine and DMT by Leary as well, and a dissociative anesthetic, ketamine, that is a dissociative anesthetic used medically for induction and maintenance of anesthesia, used for depression and pain management. This psychoatomic circuit, sort of a venture, on the other side of the gate, if you will, outside of space-time and the constraints of reality. So when we go outside of those consciously, we get to ketamine. We become familiar with it, in other words. DMT, dimethyltryptamine is the word, but abbreviate DMT, is an endogenous ligand of sigma-1 receptors, right? Or SIG1Rs, just the letter R, SIG1Rs. And these things is something that acts against system, these receptors. They work against what's called systemic hypoxia, right? And intergalactic consciousness is something that is situated in or relating to the spaces between galaxies. So within intergalactic consciousness, then, I guess depending on if the galaxy is three-dimensional or not, we might be near the neighborhood of the fourth dimension. We might be in the neighborhood of physics, of metaphysics. In philosophy, we might be in the neighborhood of constraints of reality. If the galaxy is just overwhelming, it's too huge, right? So we're going to take a neutral stance on these things that the eighth circuit of consciousness is associated with. We've just wanted here to understand what they are and get an idea of them, to identify them, introduce them. From the eighth circuit, the first circuit should begin. In other words, we talk about this seamless thing. We've been saying it over the course of this series. The eight circuits of consciousness in real time happen in a seamless way. We don't feel transition from one circuitry to the next, with the, I want to say, modest exception of certain philosophies we've learned or strategies, like the 5 stages of change theory, aspects of self-efficacy, self-care, personal development, right? and from that perspective into the build or structure of consciousness that is intrinsic, not extrinsic, right, or internal. And with that being said, from the eighth circuit, not to it, but from it, the first circuit should begin and continue to repeat. This model is internal naturally, right? And naturally we can continue, transition from one idea or thought to another. Because this model is not about Coca-Cola products or Pepsi products or Charmin or Fruit of the Loom or Magnavox, etc. This one's about the 8 circuits of consciousness. That's what this model is. And so we can go from one transition period to another, right? Or thought, for that matter. And this is cognitive functioning and developmental. Discordians are good examples of higher degrees, and we could perhaps develop a more profound exploration of the meaning of the craft degrees of Freemasonry, which are deemed essentials in the Illuminati, after it was agreed that the members would practice an agreed unified system in the essential 3 degrees of Freemasonry, and to be left to their own devices as to which, if any, system of higher degrees they wished to pursue during the 18th century. This would be a federation of Grand Lodges, Discordians, and members would be free to visit any of the Blue Lodges in any jurisdiction as well, right? All lodge masters would be elected, and no fees would be paid to any central authority whatsoever, right? So when we're into the circuits of consciousness, and there's not just one circuit of consciousness, we are advancing in philosophy from one degree to another. And these circuits have their own attributes, their own concernations, right? So this is a cloud of information that is going to, in practical life, totally be seamless. We're not going to see the 8 circuits of consciousness on the surface as things in real time are occurring, as we're perceiving these things in real time occurring, deeming these things good or bad, thinking about our survival mode. Is what we perceive so dangerous is better to get out of the area, change locations, flee from this threat. One of the earlier modes of survival, right? To go flight mode, right? In 1776, the Covenant of Perfectibility was founded by Brother Weishaupt and 4 other students. And they, the members, known as perfectibilists, right? While we sort of journey down the psychoatomic circuit. In 1777, Brother Weishaupt joins Freemasonry. Prudence Lodge is where he's admitted under the right of strict observance. In 1778, the name changes. He obtains a dispensation to set up his own lodge, Hail Eris. with a warrant from the Grand Lodge of Prussia called the Royal York for Friendship. His lodge named House of Theodore of the Good Counsel, or Theodore of the Good Counsel, to impress elect Theodore of Bavaria, whom was at the time. Relations with Union Lodge in Frankfurt, affiliated to the Premier Grand Lodge of England, enabled Lodge Theodore to become independently recognized and able to declare its independence. As a new mother lodge, it could now spawn lodges of its own. Right? And so this signifies discordians. With regard to Illuminati, when we were talking Illuminati Masonic groups, Illuminati Masonic organizations, Illuminati Masonic signs, in the practice of a moral system that complements personal development. Right? We are practicing, as has been agreed in this order, which is still the same fraternal organization, right? The 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge and Freemasonry, right? We have a curriculum that explains value, virtue, and principles. The Illuminatus trilogy is a venue, if you will, in the 1970s that enabled discordianism to rise in the hearing decibel of society, more or less higher than it was before. Got more popular. It was a spurt in its popularity, a boost, right? These Masonic or fraternal historic facts support our advancement of the human species. We have to cycle through the circuits inevitably as discord or chaos, right? In reality, among or along with order, in my opinion, right? We are charged here today, Discordians, as far as I'm concerned, so every Mason's charged to spread Masonic light, to explore the space-time cognitively, the 4th dimension in physics. It builds our senses. We need the environment to be better in our self-awareness, which influences our consciousness. Right? We should never be unconscious or non-conscious while breathing humans on Earth. We shouldn't be unconscious, right? So as the motto goes, we are always watching you, so let's make sure we are actually conscious, right? Because the psychoatomic circuit exists and it allows access to the intergalactic consciousness. Maybe there's a model somewhere about the intergalactic consciousness, as there is Leary's model on the 8 circuits of consciousness, right? This consciousness, intergalactic, that predates life in the universe, and lets humans operate outside of space-time, kind of get out there. It's kind of like psychoatomic circuit. Yeah, and not only outside of the space-time, but also outside of the constraints of reality. So we can use imagination, we can use fantasy, right? And, in real time, when we're going to look at the seamlessness, the seamless order of transition from one circuit to the next, or even from one emotion to the next. When things are happening in real time, we are very impulsive when it comes to emotional intelligence, because logically and fairly we are interactive. Others are influencing our actions or our perception or empowering us or just influencing positive action in general. But when we are observing in our world, in our society, naturally, our ways are just, very social casual. Humanity is. We are not your ideal predator species as a living being. We are more of a prey. We are not particularly your carnivore, rather herbivore. We use reasoning, whereas animals, which are also mammals, as are humans, they don't use that. You know, it's more of a cut and dry platform, if you will, to be upon. Whereas we taking, day to day, again, today, for example, wake up, whatever time it is. Let's suppose we went to sleep. Suppose we used the 24-inch gauge, working tool for Freemasonry in its symbolic meaning, to engage, right, for the day, to be spoken of on such a premise as personal development. We'd be looking at whatever time we got up in the day instead of when the day really started, because we probably were asleep. If we were using the 24-inch gauge all day, every day, then of course we were asleep. But let's say when we're now awake, and today, for example, is Monday, at 11 o'clock p.m. or 11:59 p.m. tonight, right? I should be already asleep, but let's say I'm still awake, and it's Monday, and the second hand on the clock strikes 60, and it becomes 12 a.m. And I slept the night before, so I've not been up 24 whole hours. But as if I had been, I'm going to say that today is now Tuesday. Right? Not having been aware of Monday for 24 hours. Of course, between them, we could take a little bit of Monday and how long I was awake, and a little bit of Tuesday, and maybe nothing else in this week, but maybe the week before we could take 3 or 4 days out of it where I was awake again for some sort of period of time, and come up with, in my lifetime, I've experienced a 24-hour period, but it has not been consecutive hours to a day if I'm using the 24-inch gauge, right? So we tend to be this way. That is explained of the psychoatomic circuit, right? Sometimes we get away from space-time and the constraints of reality, ironically. But this is because we as humans are built to the way we are, in the image of the great architect of the universe. And we use reason because we have dominion upon this planet of all things that are here. Fowls, birds, the land, the air, they've all been named by the first man created, as has been the first woman who was created. Right? So we are very philosophical beings, and therefore we very much need an essential, very much use could be made with something like the eighth circuit of consciousness. Right? So when we study, it's a way in this fraternity, in this brotherhood, in my opinion, studying on history of this organization diligently and contemplating over the information practicing the tenets of Freemasonry, practicing the virtues of this fraternity, right? Practicing use of the working tools, right? And actively or proactively or assertively participating or and attending functions or events that are scheduled and posted, right? These things give us or are ways out of space time and the constraints of reality. That's the, center of the psychoatomic circuit, right? We go into the intergalactic consciousness, right? Where we are among others. It's not just the one self. Physically, it's not just the one self. There are others. And when we're there, we've got to learn, we've got to exchange, not just have it a one-way situation. As we understood early on about the reality of consciousness, it happens or results from the exchange of information. So we have an essential need, and we can very well, in philosophical ways, develop a purpose as well for accessing the intergalactic consciousness. And in my opinion, very validly so, right? Very pertinent. Very pertinent. I encourage you to study more, to continuously study, right? Because in something that we do in a day, we're coming across one of these specific circuitries. And in a type of sublime experience, I'm sure, I believe, I take the chance, I dare and believe, that we are somewhat, if not completely, conscious of that and aware as well. However, in mind of the other circuitries, we might not enlighten on it as much as we would if we actually had all the others, in the same instance or same frequency while this is going on with the one. So there's ways to get in and out of these developmental points of the circuit. And each one has 3 stages that detail how that happens or that information. But we've got a really good thing here in this fraternity. And I'm going to leave it at that. It's not much to the 8th lecture, outside of just presenting a little bit of perspective that will hopefully empower others to be continual about the evaluation or the look in at these types of models, right? So suffice that to me, it was appropriate for the end to be as seamless as I would have been wanting to describe it as, comparably from text to the naked eye, with the first circuit in mind. So this is a cycle, right? From 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, then back to 1. So, this lecture was a really, really very short one, all in light of the first circuit, just beyond it. Trust me, right? There is no void space or end of the 8 circuits of consciousness, because the concentration is not on the circuits, right? It's on consciousness. That's what we are trying to make sure we foster, whether we're in the mortal world or if we are in the immortal world. We have some access to the immortality, remember, we can do that. We can get into immortality. We are allowed to get into the immortality. The Seventh Circuit allows for essential immortality in humans, right? And in essential immortality, that is the continued existence, right? So we're not worried about the circuits. When we're sleeping, when we're waking, and we don't know what's happening in between, how this is possible besides creation of mind by the gods, by the God in the image of himself and the other gods, right? But we are concerned with consciousness, though not the circuits, because we don't keep track of the circuits well enough, for one. We have to sleep sometimes, and we have to, from sleep, wake sometimes, right? But consciousness is something that is got to stick with us on each side of the gate. Or we're only going to experience happiness and satisfaction if it's all sublime, by the way, on one side of the gate. And there's still the other side to reckon with, if you will. No pun intended. Right? So the continued existence of an immaterial soul, right, or mind beyond the physical death of the body is essential immortality, and we can understand that as mortals. The more we work on doing that, when we are truly immortal, we're just past that, and we've died. We want to still have consciousness, right? And so I thank you again. This one's about half the length of most of the other lectures series, I think. And I think we covered a lot, mostly bonding as brethren and sisters in the fraternity. Mostly bonding, that I can really speak up and say, I feel, right? In terms of the lectures, the Leary's model, the 8 circuits of consciousness, I'm not sure, because we all have perceptions that are unique. And we're going to have to learn to develop our consciousness on our own. We're going to have to learn that sometimes of the 8 circuits of consciousness, we have to do without a certain number of them in order to understand one specific one, and not feel that they've been discarded or that this model is dissembled, right? We've got to look at it in an esoteric way, and that is always together. No matter how we can pull it apart, we can put it back together. It's sure as we can put the 9-point Enneagram back together, take it apart, physically, no. Manually, no. Up here, consciously. And with that, I'm glad we had the chance to meet here. Let us close here. Great content to the universe. We are very thankful to be able to meet here, to convene, and to share and practice brotherly love, relief, and truth. We're also thankful that you have enabled and allowed us to meet upon the level of equality, act by the plumb of uprightness, and part upon the square of virtues. We thank you and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. So mote it be. I'll see you the other side.